It's true what they say. Sometimes reality is stranger than fiction. And by the end of this video, you'll understand just how true that is. With an endless supply of eyebrow-raising news stories to choose from, there's never a shortage of people getting up to truly bizarre stuff. So if news of the weird is your kind of thing, stay tuned. And best of all, if you have any wacky local news stories of your own to share, you can. Just email me to be featured with a shout out in a future episode of Weird News. TV man leaves TVs on porches in dead of night. In September 2019, the residents of a Virginia neighborhood awoke to an unusual gift left on their doorsteps. Outside almost every house on the street, old televisions had been left with no explanation. But it wasn't a visit from old St. Nick. Security footage from several of the houses showed the person leaving the gifts had an unusual taste in headwear. This mysterious TV man spent an entire night leaving dozens of vintage screens, and to this day, there's been no real explanation. The man police believed to be the TV man faces charges of dumping trash and trespassing, as he'd stashed more than 30 additional TVs in a condemned building. The weirdest part? The same thing happened in a different neighborhood the previous year. Some people have all the luck. The only free stuff in my neighborhood is a flea-ridden couch someone left in the street. Man uses underwear mask during armed robbery. When police radioed back to HQ after being called to a convenience store robbery in progress, their colleagues were left puzzled by their descriptions of the robber. The suspect was described as a white male, mid-20s, average height, wearing gray clothing on his head with eye holes. Only that gray clothing was actually a gray pair of underwear. Hopefully pulled from the clean laundry basket, the armed robber took off with his impromptu mask secured, but it wasn't enough to keep the police off his tail. Concerned Missouri citizens were easily able to identify the man as Sean McCormick, and he was arrested days later. The world simply wasn't ready for Sean's bold approach to fashion. Doctors report first case of person who urinates alcohol. When doctors in Pittsburgh first attempted to treat a woman for her diabetes and liver troubles, they suspected she was hiding a drinking problem from them. Her urine test consistently tested positive for alcohol, though the woman never appeared intoxicated. It wasn't until further testing that their views changed when they discovered a particular strain of yeast related to brewer's yeast had begun overpopulating her bladder. The yeast appeared to be fermenting sugar in the bladder into alcohol, making her urine alcoholic. You probably wouldn't want to drink it, but the idea of being your own personal brewery does have certain appeals. Coronavirus solves decade-long panda problem. There's nothing wrong with being a little shy, but after 10 years of trying, the staff at Ocean Park in Hong Kong were growing impatient that, no matter what they tried, their pandas refused to mate. But of all things, coronavirus proved the necessary push the two pandas needed when the pandemic forced the park to close. Maybe it was the sense of impending doom, or, more likely, the freedom from the constant gaze of park guests, but the panda bear finally went at it. Ever heard the expression, a watch pot never boils? Well, in this case, it's more like a watch panda never fornicates. Father gives son embarrassing haircut to make sure he doesn't sneak out. With the spread of COVID-19, stay-at-home orders have been issued by governments all over the world. But one young Filipino boy insisted on sneaking out despite the government's and his father's orders. So to ensure his son would never leave the house, the dad picked up a shaver and gave the kid's hair a 45-year forecast. If this was a prediction of the future, the kid did not like what he saw, and stayed at home, which was really for his own good. Either that or his dad just has a great sense of humor. Man thwarts lockdown by running marathon in backyard. For some people, a career change can be a very difficult thing, but for professional Scottish javelin thrower James Campbell, the switch to home workouts enforced by coronavirus was no biggie at all. In fact, James became so good at exercising in his 20-foot-long backyard that he decided to try something crazy in it. After his tweet saying, 10,000 retweets and I'll run a marathon in my back garden hit its targets, James put on his running shoes. Running more than 7,000 lengths of the garden in 6 hours to hit 26.2 miles, his DIY marathon made 20,000 pounds for healthcare workers. And who said Twitter's good for nothing? Shredded t-shirts used as toilet paper back up California city sewer. In light of the current global pandemic, people are going a little crazy when shopping for certain essential items. I'm talking specifically about toilet paper, which people have begun stockpiling in ridiculous quantities, causing shortages. And one of the unfortunate responses to these shortages came in Redding, California, when shredded t-shirts people had begun using as toilet paper clogged up a segment of the city sewers. The Waste Management Organization pointed out the very obvious point that t-shirts should not be flushed, but not before a big stink was caused. Rat breaks into ATM, eats nearly $20,000, then drops dead. A lockdown of a different kind was discovered when workers investigating a faulty ATM found more than $18,000 in shredded cash inside, alongside the remains of a rat. It's true that rats will eat almost anything, and while it died happily with a very full stomach, it clearly bit off more than it could chew. Man consumes nothing but beer for 6 weeks, loses 44 pounds. Taking inspiration from 17th century monks who would fast during Lent while consuming nothing but beer, a man from Cincinnati took on a beer-only diet of his own. Through consuming nothing but his so-called liquid bread 2 to 5 times a day for 46 days, he was able to shed 44 pounds. Remarkably, his frothy-topped fasting left him feeling healthier, and he said he hoped it would help him kick bad eating habits. But on an empty stomach, can you imagine how trash this guy must have been getting every day? As long as he didn't drive anywhere, I'll bet he had a pretty great time. Would you give the beer diet a try? Let me know down below. Local police say raccoons aren't rabid. They're just drunk. Police in Milton, West Virginia prepared for the worst when several residents made complaints of rabid raccoons roaming around. When overcome by rabies, the animals are known to become overly confident and aggressive, and may attack without provocation. But that wasn't the case with these raccoons, because the police quickly realized they weren't rabid at all. They were drunk. The critters had been feasting on fermented crab apples that had fallen from trees in the neighborhood, getting thoroughly sloshed in the process. So the police took the raccoons back to the woods to sleep it off like a couple of teenagers on New Year's Eve. Exotic bird turns out to be gull covered in curry. In July 2019, a bright orange, exotic-looking bird was brought to a wildlife hospital after being spotted on the side of a highway in England. The staff were bewildered as to how such an exotic-looking bird ended up there, until they washed it and the orange came straight off. Underneath the orange coating was nothing but a plain old seagull. It had somehow dyed itself that color, seemingly having collided with someone's takeout curry or a large supply of turmeric. The curry-scented coating was so thick the bird was unable to fly before they washed him clean. Either this colorful fellow had just had the meal of his life, or he's never eating curry again. 2 elderly men sneak out of nursing home to attend a heavy metal festival. Even in retirement age, it's never too late for a little rebellion. 2 elderly men from Germany proved this in 2018 when they snuck out of their nursing home to attend a heavy metal festival. When they were eventually found, they were reportedly dazed and disoriented, but were nonetheless reluctant to come home. The spirit of rock and roll is clearly still burning strong in those 2. Florida man parks smart car in kitchen so it won't blow away. When Hurricane Dorian struck in 2019, one Florida man became anxious that his tiny superlight smart car might get damaged or even blown away. So he drove it into his kitchen. Parked on an old rug, the only downside, apart from it taking up most of the room, was that his dogs were confused by it. Still, I think this could be a bold new marketing strategy for smart cars. The perfect vehicle for when you've got too much kitchen but not enough garage. Fox sneaks into UK Parliament, poops outside politician's door. When it comes to politics, sometimes you just gotta play dirty. A fox in London, England clearly knew this all too well, as he snuck into the Parliament building and pooped outside a politician's office. He was eventually caught and let back out into the streets, but in his heart, he knew his political message had been received. Loud and clear. Woman arrested for posing as sheriff, releasing boyfriend from jail. In a desperate attempt to free her boyfriend from jail, Maxine Feldstein from Arkansas put on the performance of a lifetime. With forged documents in hand, she posed as a sheriff's deputy and convinced the jailers at Washington County Jail to release her boyfriend, Nick Lowe. It wasn't until 2 days later, when the real deputy called the jail to let them know he was en route to pick up Lowe, that they finally realized they'd been swindled. The embarrassed jailers collaborated with police, and eventually both Maxine and Nick were arrested and charged. With Maxine landing herself a 15-year sentence, the attempt at freedom ultimately turned both lovebirds into jailbirds. Plumber sues dealership for $1 million after truck ends up with terrorists. When Mark Oberholzer traded in his plumbing business's truck at a dealership, he never expected to see it again. But the Mark I Plumbing logo soon reappeared online in the last place Mark wanted his business advertised. After the truck was auctioned off to Turkey in 2013, it popped up a year later in a picture showing Syrian Islamic militants in combat. They were firing weapons from the back of the truck, with Mark's logo and business number still visible on the front door. As a result, Mark was harassed with over 1,000 threatening phone calls from people assuming he'd worked with the terrorists. The dealership had promised to remove the decals from Mark's truck and had failed spectacularly, so it's no wonder he's looking for over $1 million in damages from them. And maybe that dealership should start reconsidering some of their clientele. Stalker finds pop star's home by studying her pupil reflections in selfies. Under any circumstances, having a stalker is a scary thing. But one stalker of a Japanese pop star proved disturbingly inventive in their deranged attempts to track their idol down in late 2019. By looking at details in the reflections of the singer's eyes in selfies she posted online, the fanatic fan was able to pinpoint a train station she frequently visited. From there, he was able to figure out where her apartment was, and he broke in, attacking her. Thankfully, the man was arrested, but it doesn't make this bizarre tale of extreme stalking any less terrifying. Chinese farmer wins first prize at National Pig Testicle Championships. In 2015, a Chinese farmer drove his prize pig 1,700 miles from the Gansu province to the prestigious Pig Testicle Championships in Beijing. The 6-week-long journey was worth it. Contest officials confirmed his pig had the biggest gonads in the land, which isn't surprising when you take a look at them. As great as a story as this is, it comes from Britain's Sunday sport paper, which has about as much legitimacy as the writing on a truck stop bathroom stall. While it may not be all that factual, the tabloid certainly has balls. Woman gets prison for $1.6 million family curse scam. There are a lot of phonies in the strange world of psychics. Many of them make their money appealing to desperate people who'd give anything to reconnect with a lost loved one. But some of them are much worse, like one Florida woman who convinced a wealthy woman from Texas that her family was cursed. Offering to lift the curse for a price, the Floridian psychic began swindling her victim out of payment after payment. The money, which she claimed was being spent on crystals and candles for rituals to lift the curse, ultimately amounted to $1.6 million. The gullible, wealthy victim had no idea she was being manipulated until the fraudster psychic was found out by police and sentenced to 3 years in prison. It was at that point that the victim realized the only curse in her life had been the sham psychic she'd had the great misfortune to meet. Couple win battle to name son Lucifer after opposition from the registrar. When Dan and Mandy Sheldon from Derbyshire, England welcomed their son into the world in July 2020, they never expected they'd meet so much resistance against the name they'd chosen for him. With objections coming from the registrar as well as some members of the public, the couple were appalled that their choice was being opposed. But then again, they did decide to call their newborn son Lucifer, claiming their choice was driven by the word's traditional Greek origins, meaning light bringer. They seemed not to care about its devilish connotations. Despite opposition from religious groups, the couple stuck to their guns, and presumably horns and cloven hooves, and won the battle to name their child after the Lord of Darkness. Hopefully, little Lucy's relationship with his father works out better than it did for that other Lucifer guy and his old man. Man saws neighbor's garage in half amid boundary dispute. There's nothing quite so effective at making neighbors hate each other as a good old-fashioned boundary dispute. So, when a family realized their neighbors had built a shed over the property line into their yard and were continuing to expand onto land that wasn't theirs, tensions arose. But despite several second opinions from land surveyors, the intruding neighbors refused to cooperate. So the family whose land was being encroached upon took matters into their own hands. Armed with a reciprocating saw, the family patriarch cut away the parts of the shed that were encroaching on his property. He then erected posts and later a fence to clearly outline the boundaries, though the shed, which had been left looking like an edgy art installation, was undoubtedly the main attraction. The dispute was reportedly settled after the sawing incident, and the once intruding family were left to enjoy their new, very open-plan shed. Woman trades hairpin for a minivan. There are some people in the world whose sales skills are so good, they could probably convince you to trade your phone for a candy bar. Demi Skipper, the central person of this next news oddity, isn't quite that good, but her actions in July 2020 suggest she's not far off. Taking part in a challenge to trade objects for increasingly more valuable objects, Demi started out with nothing but a hairpin. Using the gift of gab, but having to abide by rules of not trading with anyone except strangers, she began trading up and up with an impressive level of skill. First, she traded the hairpin for a pair of earrings, then traded those for a set of margarita glasses, which were in turn exchanged for a vacuum cleaner. Eventually, she'd acquired an iPhone 11 Pro Max, which she exchanged for a Dodge Ram van. While the van had a few issues, Demi was able to get it working and aims to eventually reach her goal of trading something for a house. From a hairpin to a house. Now that's a return on investment. Which of these crazy news tales did you find most amusing? Let me know in the comments section below, and send me your own crazy local news stories at stories@beamazed.com. Thanks for watching.